Welcome to the test set. Here we talk with some of the brightest thinkers and tinkerers in statistical analysis, scientific computing, and machine learning, digging into what makes them tick, plus the insights, experiments, and OMG moments that shape the field. On this episode, we sit down with Rebecca Barter, senior data scientist at Arine and adjunct assistant professor at University of Utah, who has really interesting perspectives on learning and teaching and demystifying AI. Hey everyone, welcome to the test set where we dig into the people behind the data. I'm joined here with Rebecca Barter, who's a tenured data scientist at Arine and an adjunct at professor at University of Utah. And I'm joined by my co-hosts, Wes McKinney, who's a principal architect at Posit, and Hadley Wickham, who's chief scientist at Posit. Rebecca, we're so happy to have you. I thought as maybe a quick icebreaker, I could just start off with something you said. There's so much I want to get into, but just really quick. You mentioned a lot in prepping about AI and teaching and kind of your path. But one thing that stood out to me was you said you're not the kind of person who can work on something you don't care about. And I feel like that is so relatable. I thought maybe you could just kick us off with a little bit of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I am, I get bored easily, I think is really what happens. So if I'm, like, given a bunch of tasks or, like, working on a kind of field that I'm like, "There's no point to doing any of this, it's just, like, mindless, like, tasks," I start just staring out the window thinking about what I'm doing with my life. So I'm very much like if I wake up in the morning and I have tasks where I'm like, yeah, I actually care about completing these, like, I feel like there's some kind of impact, like whether it's to other people, to like the company that I work for, or like, to a field as a whole, like I'm going to be so much more engaged. I'm going to actively have fun, whereas if I wake up and I'm like, all right, let's just kind of get button seat and like do the thing I gotta do, and, like, it doesn't really matter if I do it or not, but, like, I have to do it, like, I'm gonna probably start crying at some point. That's just it's not me. Some people can.
No, that's so real. And as I understand it, you're in Tahoe, so you live in the mountains. So
Yeah.
if you're not motivated, also you have all these beautiful mountains outside.
Exactly, and I've definitely done that. So before I was living in Tahoe, I was living in Salt Lake City, and it was the same thing, so there's, like, mountains right there, so, like, anytime I start feeling that feeling of, like, "I don't wanna be doing this," I find some kind of excuse to just, like, go run away in the mountains and
Yeah, no,
stops
that's
doing
legit.
the task.
No, I feel that so hard. I'm just, yeah, Hadley and Wes, how do you feel about, can you grind through things you don't want to do?
So sometimes you have to do work that you'd rather not, but it's for the greater good, or like the project just is not going to be able to move forward without it. So I've definitely found myself like dealing with like thinking back on the early days of Pandas. It was definitely everything having to do with Windows was like the thing that I didn't want to do. And so there was a dark period where I had like my Windows virtual machine was like the blessed place where I would create the installer packages for pandas. This was before we had wheels. This was before conda and uv. It was like dark times creating these .exe files to install pandas, and at no point did that ever spark joy. This was purely work that needed to get done for the greater good of the project.
Yeah, I can see no shade on Windows, but yeah, sometimes Windows is being the demotivator.
JJ used to say that, like, I think there was some company he was like saying, like, if you want people to work on Windows, particularly Windows installers, like those people just need like an automatic bonus, because it's just like such important work, but like no one wants to do it and it's painful.
I think that comes around in a lot of aspects as well. I feel like whenever I'm teaching a workshop, it's always the people on Windows who have, like, installation issues, and, like, I'm like, "I have no idea how to help you because I don't even know how to use a Windows machine, like, normally."
Yeah, that's real. Well, I hope that you're working on a lot of things you do want to do right now. And I think I'm so curious to dig into a bit about your like AI work and what you're doing as a data scientist now. I figured what one approach that might be nice is maybe you could tell us a little bit about your work at Arene now, and then I'd love to circle back and maybe talk about kind of your path to getting there a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, I think related to your previous question as well of like, I like to do things that I'm passionate about, really is kind of what it's about, is like the thing that's really got me going in terms of data science has been like applications in healthcare, and like the kind of patient focused like approach to like analysis and trying to like help improve patient experiences. And so that's really big part of what's driven me to my current position, which is at Arine, which is a kind of medication management startup where we're really trying to like make sure people are taking like correct medications and they're not they're adhering to their medications and like all of stuff like that, where it's just like really kind of focusing on the patient experience and trying to make sure like we're improving health outcomes. So like that for me is something that I can wake up in the morning and be like, yeah, stoked to do that. So yeah, I think it's like for me, I'm very much drawn to these kind of healthcare applications in general, but it's also like I'm lucky that I get to work with a lot of really wonderful, intelligent people who are kind and like just a joy to work with as well, which makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's awesome. What's the team you're on like? Like what's the like how many people do you work with and what's the setup like?
Yeah, we're a team of like I think maybe 10 to 12 people. We're kind of split between like health outcomes and data science, and I kind of do both. I do a lot of like tool building, like so if there's a lot of kind of tech debt and like things that have been built that are really kind of ad hoc and inefficient, I do a lot of like kind of working with whoever wrote that original code to like be like, let's create this, just turn this into a pipeline where it's like you just run a script, it maybe does something with like Quarto even down the end and like creates this nice report, and like you don't have to like just like you know run this and then change this config and then change that config and then run that and then run that and then oh you want something else, okay, let's do it all again. Like like the people that I work with are a big combination of like engineers, like people with stats background, people who are more data kind of science background. Like it's a pretty diverse team, and it's really cool. Like everyone's really easy to work with and really friendly. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I love the like the tooler role where you get to kind of roll in and help like spruce things up and like put some glitter on it. Um how is it how do you find like how do you choose what to beef up or like which tools like who needs or what needs a little bit of like tool love?
Yeah, usually there's like it's pretty clear like when we've got inefficient pipelines. Like I think it's also, a nature of being a startup where a lot of things are built kind of ad hoc and for individual customers, and then it's like, oh, we need to kind of scale this up to be more general and more applicable. So, it's a lot of the time it's like there's a lot of things that we do repeatedly for customers that like we need it's like very clear, it's like this could be improved. So like it's pretty easy to point towards, okay, that particular pipeline is really inefficient and could very much be like benefited from having someone create kind of a overall compute pipeline that makes it a lot easier to go from point A to point B, rather than going point A point one, A point two, A point three, and then eventually you get to point B and you realize a lot of things that you could have done differently along the way.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think you mentioned before this that I've seen you've done a lot of R work in R, but that you might be doing a little more like Python and stuff now. I'm curious the kind of mix of tools you're using in your
Yeah.
work now.
Yeah, so for a very long time, like I learned R when I was like 18, I'm not going to tell you how old I am now, but I'm older than 18. Uh, so I learned R before the tidyverse existed, before Hadley had created ggplot, all the good stuff. And that was like very much like, like that was what I was comfortable with. Like I was like, yeah, I get it. I'm like I felt like I was our queen, I'm like, I know how to do our things. And then Hadley came along and like ruined everything. Um, because now he's created all these new tools that are way better that I had to go and learn. And I remember someone being like I was, fortunately for me, I was like, I was in grad school by this point, and someone was like, okay, we're going to use this new thing called ggplot in and dplyr in this like project or whatever. And I was like, yeah, can't I just do what I've always done? And it's like, no. So that, forced me to learn. And then I realized, like, in that experience, I also very much realized, like, oh, things do kind of keep changing. You can't kind of just like learn the one thing and then, say, oh, I've mastered it. Like you never really master it, because what you've mastered today is going to be really irrelevant in like these days, really irrelevant in like 3 weeks. But like, back then it was like a couple years. And so now it's kind of like, so like through kind of like grad school, I did a lot of R, and like, I feel like I got pretty good at R. I like, mostly like a lot of the stuff that Hadley and Co have built, and that was like my day-to-day toolbox, and like in academia, I was in a statistics department, like people are using R. That's kind of like the normal thing. And then kind of gradually, as I started trying to like intentionally expose myself to projects where I would be forced to learn new tools, I kind of like started, like, someone was like, oh, hey, I've got this project that like I realized would end up, I'd have to learn some NLP, I'd have to use Python. And I'm like, the stakes were low, so I was like, this is perfect, because like this will be a really good opportunity for me to like learn like these new tools where it's like there's no particular like deadlines, like they don't have any expectations, like they don't know anything about data. So like it's like a really good opportunity for me to like take the time and be like, okay, I'm going to take on that project because it means I'm going to learn something new. And this is like, for example, when I was at the University of Utah full time, I found some collaborators in health informatics and health communications that were like, they really wanted help with like a lot of this kind of text data that they had. And so I specifically like was like, yeah, I'll help with that, and learned a lot of new stuff there. And now I've kind of transitioned to industry. I feel like, and especially with like the advent of AI, like I feel like I've gotten really good at picking up new tools. And I think like that's one of my main skills is like sure, I'm really good at R and like I'm decent at Python now, but like I wouldn't say like those are the things that are going to propel me in the future. The thing that's really going to propel me in the future is like, you show me a new tool, I'll like play with it and like learn how to use it really quickly, mostly because like as long as you can get to like a basic level of competence, like AI can kind of help you get the rest of the way these days, like pretty quickly. So like in terms of the specific tools that I'm using, like yesterday I used like Python, I used R, I used Quarto, I used Streamlit, which is like Python. It's kind of like Shiny, but not really. It's like Shiny Python, kind of. I stared and got very confused by an AWS step function. Like I'm now like I use SQL, like like every day I'm just like exposed to like such a broad array of tools that some of which I'd never even heard of like 6 months ago,
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. You're able to just pick up new tools and kind of move into them faster. And I almost wonder, it's interesting you brought up ggplot too, also as being the one someone might dread learning, because I think ggplot kind of warns people. Like I think it gives people a warning, like, hey, it doesn't say you're gonna have a bad time, but I think it's like you're gonna need to put some work in before you have like a good time.
One
So
of their
that's, I feel
random
like
startup messages used to recommend like reading
a whole book.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember when I first started using ggplot, I was trying to make just like a simple scatter plot, and I just kept getting an error, and I could not figure out what I was doing wrong. I'm sure now thinking back, I was just like missing the AES like function, but like I was getting so frustrated, and like it was just like now I look at it and I'm like, well, it's so obvious and it's so clear, and it's just like I think it's just like when you aren't used to learning new things as well, like especially like when it's a big change in syntax, it's like you kind of look at the code and you can't see what's wrong with it, and it's like
There's also like a different era of like getting help. Like there wasn't, obviously when chatbots, like there wasn't even Stack Overflow. There was like the R help mailing list, which was like pretty unfriendly.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
mean, a thing that's been keeping me up at night lately thinking about is, you know, I feel like the whole model for how people discover and start using new open source technologies, like new R libraries, new Python libraries, is going to have to change because, like, our LLM coding agents and assistants are all really good at all of the projects that exist now, which have rich bodies of training data available on GitHub and Stack Overflow and all over the internet. But if you build something new, almost by definition, there's not going to be any training data available. And so essentially, we're going to have to build things in such a way that we can like point the agents at the project's documentation or like create the projects in such a way such that this new thing can be presented up to our you know AI co-pilots, so that they can figure out how to take advantage of something new. Because otherwise, we're going to end up like locked in the present moment of like nobody uses anything new because if their LLMs don't know how to use it, and so that becomes, you know, the snake has no tail left to eat at a certain point.
No, I think about that a lot actually, and I encountered that like because like I mentioned I've been using Quarto. Like specifically, what I've been doing with Quarto is building like a quite sophisticated Quarto dashboard, like report with like all the tabs and like cards and all this kind of stuff, and like they're like I'm using Gemini because that's what we use at our company, and like it does not know anything about Quarto dashboards. And so like my default now when I'm looking up something and I'm like, oh, how do I do this thing? Is like I type it into Gemini or GPT or like whatever I'm using, or like I use the inbuilt kind of like thing in my IDE. Like that's my go-to now. And it's very clear to me, like when I encounter something that's new, that like it gives you a lot of very confident advice. Like it doesn't tell you, hey, I don't actually know much about this because it's kind of new, like, or there's not a lot of documentation. And it very much like gives you a lot of confident advice, and you end up trying to spend a lot of time debugging the terrible code that it gives you because it's just made it up. It doesn't like tell you that it made it up. And then like at the same time, like I used to write a lot of blogs, like tutorials and stuff like that on a lot of R stuff and like, coding stuff. And like there's not nearly as much incentive like to do that anymore as well. Cause it's like, well, people aren't Googling to be like, how do I use the per package? They're going to the AI and they're being like, how do I use the per package? And it's going to do a much better job than I ever did, So it's like things are shifting a lot in terms of how we learn things and how we troubleshoot for sure. And I don't know how that's going to look in terms of new stuff that's coming out that really doesn't have a whole lot of documentation and people asking good questions and giving good answers on Stack Overflow and stuff like that. Like, who knows?
Yeah.
Scary.
I do. It's tough too. Like I love blogs so much. Just like somehow also like encountering a new person with a blog when they have a post that really like resonates with you. So that it is a tough one to like think, like your point about motivation for like certain types of blog posts being lower. I guess maybe one thing that would be cool to talk about too is like on the topic of AI, I know you gave the talk AI hype helper hindrance. Um Maybe you could explain a little bit of that. So that was at Posit Conf.
Yeah, that was a really fun talk to give and to prepare, actually. It was kind of funny. So I think when I started preparing, or like when I proposed the talk, I was very much like, yeah, I know how to use like all these like AI agents and whatever ID. I was using VS Code a lot because I wanted to use Copilot. That was kind of the main option when I started using it. And then I came around to like the point where it's like, okay, I have to actually like write this talk, and like everything had changed. Like literally, like there was like no resemblance between like how I was using it when I started using it to like how I was using it when it actually like, or like how I could have been using it. Because like another one of those things where it's really easy. You start using it and then you're like, okay, I get it, and then you stop paying attention. You're like, I get it. I don't need to like see all these new things that are happening. But basically, like so many like things had been added. There was now like an agent, and I kind of focused that particular talk a lot on like the positron assistant, but it's the same. I'm using like Claude in like PyCharm a lot, like in my current job, and like VS Code has equivalent stuff as well. Like there's like an agent, there's like an editor, there's like a chat, there's like code completion, there's like all this stuff that is now a part of like these AI tools for coding that like I really like wasn't like keeping up. And then, like, I feel like I do it this kind of way where it's like, I'll, like, learn something and then I'll be like, "Yeah, I get it." And then I'll suddenly realize for some reason, "Oh, wait, it's moved on." And then I'll, like, have another rapid period of, like, learning, and then I'll, like, stagnate again, and then I'll be like, "Oh, wait, what? It can do what now?" And, like, it'll be 'cause, like, someone mentioned something and I'm like, "What?" So, like, that kind of thing is, like, kind of it's hard keeping up, I think, with that. Like, I struggle with that for sure, but I think my conclusion, like, really from this talk is, like, I've been, like, using, like, these tools for quite a while now. I probably started when Copilot was pretty new. And, like, for the most part, it was, like, hype, help, or hindrance. Like, well, it's kinda hype, like, it's not really gonna do everything for you. Like, you have to really be able to tell it what you wanna do, what you want it to do. It can't really read between the lines if you give it a very vague kind of prompt. So, like, it's not I don't think it's gonna take our jobs, but, like, it's like, is it, like, uh it's, like, hindrance? Like, a little bit, like, it gives you wrong code, like, there's, like, security issues, like, sometimes it just sends you in circles, like, there's a lot of kind of, like, things that are not great about it, but, like, mostly it's just really helpful. Like, honestly, like, all of these tools so, like, this is, like, Positron Assistant, GitHub Copilot, Claude Code that are embedded inside of your IDE, like, whether it's Positron or VS Code or PyCharm or a little bit RStudio. That really just has, code completion, but, like, these tools as a whole, like, I think I said, like, in my talk, it's like for some projects, like, they don't really help me much at all. Like, if it's a pure R project, like, I'm so good at R that, like, I don't need like, I don't have to think that hard, you know? Whereas, like, if it's another project where I'm using, like, Python or, like, I'm, writing a bunch of, like, really complex CTEs in SQL that, like, I'm not that good at, like, it means that instead of spending all my time Googling how to, like, fix the thing that I did or figure out what's the function that I need, it helps me just, like I know exactly what I wanna do because like, I have that base competence, and it just really kinda helps me, like, go from that, like, level of, like, I am kinda competent in this, but I'm not an expert, to I can just produce the thing as if I was an expert. Like, it really covers that gap really well. Um, but so I think my conclusion was, like, hype, help, hindrance, all 3, but mostly help. And I think that matches pretty closely kind of my experience with them.
Yeah. Did you get any, like, in maybe like feedback or response? Like, did you have a sense for like the audience, how people felt kind of overall? Where were they on the like help, hype, hinder? I guess it's not a
Yeah.
continuum.
Yeah, I had a lot of
Uh,
people talk to me after this talk, and for the most part, it was actually a lot of people who felt like they didn't know how to get started with these things, so they weren't even at the point of saying whether it was hype, help, or hindrance. Like, they were aware of these things existing, but just, like, literally didn't know, how do you use them? Like, what are they, So, like, I think, like, it was kind of interesting because preparing for that talk, I was talking to several people during, like, the speaker coaching where they're like, "I think you can assume everyone in the room is gonna be familiar with these things." And I was, like, pushing back a lot, being like, "I don't think so." Like, I think there's a lot of people, like, just because, like, me as someone who's, like, very enthusiastic about, like, learning new things, even though it's hard to kinda keep up, like, and, like, I think it was a very biased room, like, this kind of preparation kinda session where it was, like, everyone in that room, like, is excited about learning new things and is kind of, like, whether you're fearful or excited, like, you're engaged enough to, like, go and, um, put time into learning these kind of how to use these new tools, but honestly, I think the vast majority of people aren't like that, like, and that's fine. Like, it's not, like, a big deal. It's hard. Like, I distinctly remember this feeling of, like, I'd learned base R. I was like, "I'm good," This was the skill that I needed. I needed to learn R. And then it's like, why should I learn something new when I can already do everything I need to do just fine? Like, how is it gonna help me? And, like, it's I think the vast majority of people who kinda came up and chatted with me afterwards was people just being like, "Thank you for just showing me how I can use these things, and, like, I kinda wanna give it a go now." Like, definitely there's a lot of people who, like I think the more experienced you are, the more likely you're gonna lean on the hindrance side. Uh, and sometimes the newer you are as well, because like, if you lean on it too heavily, but you don't actually know anything about the language, it's also kind of a hindrance because you can't debug, you don't know how to prompt it well enough to to be able to make it like do the right thing. So it's kind of a spectrum. Like it's not great for everyone at every stage, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say like my hot take on the matter, like I've been using Claude Code, like Cody agents pretty extensively like this year. And but I think like so-called vibe coding is way overhyped in the sense like that 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 and there's a lot of people like AI boosters going around saying that soon trademark there's going to be the coding agents are going to allow somebody without coding skills or data science skills to replace a senior or an expert person in those fields. But as a user of these tools every day, like I simply don't see it. Like I feel like being in the loop and reviewing the work that's being produced, it's helping me go faster. It's doing the typing for me, as one person put it. But like I feel like if I weren't in the loop, like reviewing the work and giving feedback and like, catching the mistakes and whatnot, which it sounds like exactly what you're saying, that yeah, without having somebody having the experience in the loop to be able to judge the output, you could end up creating a morass that's very, difficult to escape, quite quickly. And so I can imagine in sometime in the next year, we're going to enter some kind of a trough of disillusionment where, a big wave of business users try vibe coding and end up disappointed and conclude that AI sucks and, was overhyped and oversold. And even though that, they feel like they have a gun at their head, saying, use AI or else, a lot of the, attempts to eliminate data scientists or eliminate coders are going to fail as a result.
Oh yeah. There's definitely a lot of people who are like not good at using the AI who think it's just like a waste of time and like way overhyped. I don't know. I watched Hadley's keynote at Posit Conf though, so I'm convinced.
Because I was interested, I read a good kind of criticism of AI by Cory Doctorow. And I think the thing that he kind of pointed out, like the real kind of risk right now is not that like AI will replace software engineers, which I don't know, like the more I use it, and even as the better it gets, I'm like less convinced of that. The real risk though is like CEOs believe that it's going to replace software engineers and hence, start firing them. It's just, yeah, there's clearly like I love the tool and how empowering it is, even for me as someone who's like a pretty good programmer. But just like all of the stuff around like concentration of wealth and like I don't know, a lot of the people involved and the people who stand to make the most money from this it's pretty icky.
It is so interesting. I find it really hard sometimes with like a very AI assistant heavy project. Like in the early stages too, I find it really hard to like evaluate, is this even going to pay off? Like I just feel like sometimes it gets into states where I'm like, I don't know if I'm just generating a lot of garbage. Like, how can I kind of like, will I be able to rein this thing in? And I also don't know what the moves are either. Even it feels like very managerial almost, but also embracing so much production that it's like trying to control like a fire hose sometimes. But I do think to that point of like, will software engineers be replaced? Do CEOs think software engineers will be replaced? It is such a funny dilemma. Like, what is the hard challenges that will kind of like linger?
Well, I think for me, I think what's interesting is that coding agents have revealed something that we already knew deep down, which is that probably 80% of the work that we do as programmers is not that special. It's a lot of like configuring YAML files and writing, grody bash scripts and doing things that are a little bit essential, but like not special. And so, but where the actual, value is in that 20% that is more special, that requires judgment or requires like synthesizing your experience or your background in a certain in a certain domain. Like, for example, data science like requires a lot more human judgment, is a lot more subtle than software engineering, which is, software engineering is often implementing something based on a specification and then showing compliance with a with a specification, whereas like data science can often be as much art as science of knowing, like, what are the right tools to employ, and then even interpreting the results may be subjective.
Yep. Rebecca, I'm curious, like at your work, what do you see with AI? Because it sounds like you've done a lot of really great work talking about it and kind of helping people like ease into it. Like what have you seen in terms of people picking it up and trying it out?
Yeah, I think there's big spectrum, right? Like I know people who are like have no interest in trying it out and using it and incorporating it into their day to day, and like maybe they don't, if they're only ever doing stuff that's like the same as what they've already done and they're really good at that, like maybe they don't need it, like maybe it doesn't help them that much. But then I also see a lot of people who are like really diving deep into it. Like there's a lot of people, at my company and outside, like who they're like building all these like agents to like do all this stuff, like just to like take as much away from the human as they possibly can, but like in a good way for them. Like they're very excited about it. I think other people look at that and they're like, they get that fear. I mean, the first time I ever used it, I definitely had that kind of fear of like I remember I just asked it. I just said like write some code to like do, I don't remember what I asked. It was like some kind of R code I asked it to write for me. And it just like did it really well. It was like early days of ChatGPT, and I had this like sinking feeling of like, oh no.
Yeah. Like, thank you and how dare you?
I'm
Yeah.
like, everything I got so good at this thing that like I really didn't need to get that good at anymore. I just needed to get like okay at. Um and like I think a lot of people are, I feel like there's so many dimensions, and like I've spoken to so many people who are like, some people are really excited about it, some people really hate it, some people think it's stupid and useless, and like some people are like very anti, some people are very pro, like it's the entire spectrum, I think. And I don't even know what the distribution is, because like I'm probably biased, because like I was never anti kind of AI. Like definitely I think there's a lot of ethical questions and concerns that I have for sure. But like in terms of a tool, like once I started getting better at like using it, like it just increased my efficiency so much that like I now I don't spend that much time doing it, but like, when I'm talking to people about it, I'm usually trying to like convince them how useful it is, because a lot of people are skeptical. And like, I understand, because like, I think initially I was kind of like, okay, cool, it can write that code, but like, I could also write that code, but it can do so much more. Like I don't know.
I know like preparing for this, you mentioned I think you mentioned like critical thinking skills being a really big piece for a data scientist. I'm curious how that kind of plays into this, like the infusion of AI into your work.
Yeah, definitely. So it's kind of interesting, because I think I use AI a lot more to do tool building than I do for actual analysis. So like I think when I'm doing actual like data analysis, where I have to like do some explorations, and maybe I'll be like, how do I write this complicated SQL thing that I need to write? And like AI will do a better job than me. Like I might use it to like help me like come up with my SQL query, but like overall, like other than just like maybe sometimes outsourcing code that I can't immediately like without trying think of how to write, like I don't use AI that much for exploratory stuff. That is still very much just me thinking and me being like, okay, I see that there's this many claims. Is that normal? Like, how many are there supposed to be? And then I'll go look at like another data set and compare, and like I'll be like, that seems low. Like, and then I'll have to think about like, how do I need to communicate this to like the right people? How do I want to, based on who it is I'm trying to communicate it to, I need to think about, okay, do I just need to like write a sentence? Do I need to like create a table? Do I need to give them the code? Like none of that. AI can't do any of that. And that is because my job, I do a lot of tool building, but I also do a lot of analytics. So it's kind of like split 50-50. The tool building stuff, like AI all day. The analytics stuff, like a little bit of AI, like I said, like to kind of help just like speed up the code writing when it's like, it doesn't really matter. I just need the query to be written, and I can't like, it's like, how many CTEs do I need? Like, you know, what's the, how do I lateral flatten? Like, I can't remember any of that stuff. Like, so like for that kind of stuff, it is helpful. But like for tool building, I think it's a lot more useful. Whereas for things where you do need to do a lot more critical thinking and thinking about how to communicate things, like that's all still, I think, me as a human needing to do that.
It's interesting to hear about data analysis, that like this activity, when you're in like tool building mode versus like data analysis mode, you're using AI a lot more heavily for the tools. Yeah, Hadley and Wes, I'm curious if you have had like similar experiences with like working on tools versus analyzing data. Like, do you use AI to analyze data ever?
I don't do that much data analysis, but it does seem kind of like fundamentally less useful, at least right now, just because there is that loop. Like you don't know what you're doing. Like sometimes you don't know what you're doing in software engineering, but most of the time you've got like some task, you kind of know what you need to do. Whereas a lot of the time in data science, you're just like, well, what's going on here? And there's like a much more of a loop of like, do something, look at the results, do something else, look at the results. And yeah, and bringing in all of your other context about like what does this variable mean? And like remembering, oh, actually, there was this problem back in, 2020, and you can't trust the data before that. And like bringing all of that context, like yes, it would be awesome if that was all written down somewhere, and like probably we should be striving towards that, just so people in our org know, but also so agents in our org can know. But it feels like we're a long way away from that. It's just the kind of tacit knowledge and this like the kind of EDA loop of like, try something, ask a question with a plot, look at the answer, generate another plot, and do that as rapidly and many times as you can.
I mean, I've definitely used it for like a lot of mundane, like mundane data wrangling and like one-off simple queries. Like as an example, like in my home here, I have some like little apps that I've built with Claude Code that I run on machines on my home network that I can access over Tailscale, which is super convenient. But then they have SQLite databases, some of them, and every now and then I'll have a question about like what's going on with this, something looks wrong in this app. And yes, I could SSH into the machine and I could start SQLite 3 and I could write the SQL query, but using an agent, I don't have to, and everything is very simple. But rather than something taking me 20 minutes of fiddling, it's something that can be done in 60 seconds or 2 minutes. And so that seems like a good application. But if I were doing something more advanced or requiring like discretion or judgment, I would be less comfortable.
I mean, I think what you said earlier about like, even as software engineers, like 80% of what we do is just not like, it's not that magical. It's the same for data scientists. Like a lot of it's just doing pretty like routine stuff, and having something to help you like do that faster is super, super empowering. But that last 20%, like if you completely take the human out of the loop, that starts to get like pretty scary and pretty dangerous.
Yeah. Like the AI can definitely help kind of take away a lot of those mundane tasks, from us, but then like hopefully give us more time to do a lot more of the stuff that is less mundane, the thinking, whether it's critical or not thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. I find for data analysis, the even in the early stages, yeah, if the data is like messy or there's a lot of uncertainty, I think Hadley mentioned this a bit about too, like discovering sometimes the really bizarre, complex things that generated specific kinds of messy data. I find I have a lot of trouble with like almost like the chunk size of the work that an assistant might do with an analysis, like getting spit out like a big blurb or like giant kind of piece of work analyzing is pretty overwhelming, where like software engineering, I feel like I'm much more accepting of kind of like a lot of work being spit out
I do feel like it's a bit easier in software engineering too, because you can like you've kind of got this double entry bookkeeping with like code on the one hand and like tests on the other. But like it doesn't feel like there's an equivalent of that to like for data science. Like you're not writing like reusable functions most of the time. This is like a pure one-off, doesn't make sense for this particular data set, and then getting like this big chunk of code which you're either like trusting or not as a whole seems more risky.
Like a single big pass to a bar chart when you don't know what's real yet, I guess, without the kind of
And it's done a bunch
validation
of like
part.
data cleaning, and you're like, I'm sure the data needed cleaning, but like did it make like good decisions along the way? Like it's that feels. And then the kind of like the statistical challenges of like doing this stuff. Like you can't look at the data again and again and again and again in a million different ways, and then after 17 hours of like torturing the data and it finally confesses to something, like that's no longer like, you can't trust your p-values if you're in some kind of scientific concept and scientific context where that matters. So like you kind of like, if you're also spending this, kind of spending your degrees of freedom, you're spending your ability to, and if it's the model is doing a bad job, you're just kind of biasing the rest of your work.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I guess maybe to switch topics a bit. I know, Rebecca, I know you mentioned you're an adjunct professor also at University of Utah, and you spent a pretty good chunk of time teaching, and I think you have a PhD in statistics?
It's the best PhD to have in statistics.
Wait, no, I was gonna say a blurb about how psychology is the best, but I take it back. No, I think you're probably right.
I do feel like you probably actually learn more like useful things in psychology classes than you do in like statistics PhD classes. But
I learned a
I don't.
lot.
Maybe it's a grass is always greener.
Maybe
That's true.
Wes, it's not too late to bring in a third degree and argue that's the best.
Well, I have a math degree and I dropped out from a statistics PhD, so yeah, I've got nothing to add.
Honestly, I think there's some real power in dropping out. Like, actually, I would put that as number one. I'm glad I got a PhD, but I do think strategic dropout is another like top contender. If
yeah. I kind of weirdly think it's like more brave to drop out than to just finish.
Well, the running joke at the Duke statistics department, whenever I would see my advisor there was Mike West, who Bayesian time series specialist, and he always joked that I was the best student who never graduated.
Yeah, that's high praise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the teaching aspect. So maybe tell us a little bit about your teaching, and I'm so curious to hear kind of like what you learned moving from teaching into like data science and industry.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the most transferable skill is being able to explain things clearly. I like that I can't even say the word clearly when I'm talking about explaining clearly. So, I mean, like I always really loved teaching. Like when I was in grad school, like, doing my PhD in statistics, I was like, it was very clear to me, like, I am not a statistical researcher. Like that is not a path that is ever going to bring me joy or success. And like, however you want to define that, like, I'm just bad at it, like that was like very obvious to me fairly early on, but I really loved teaching. And so, I did think for a while, maybe I would go down the kind of lecturer path, like be an instructor, until I learned about how that is not a particularly viable path to take most of the time. It's getting better. But I also kind of realized like one of the main, like, I love teaching. I think the thing that I love about teaching is explaining things. I love taking someone who doesn't know anything about a topic, like from that point to being like, oh, it's not actually that complicated. Like making it seem, not necessarily like helping them understand a complicated thing, making them realize that it's not that complicated, I think is the thing that I find the most like energizing. And then when I was actually teaching like semester-long courses, like teaching a lot of undergrads, like I found that I still loved when I was actually in front of people explaining things, like that part, like I really, really enjoy. But then the part where I've got students saying, oh my God, if you don't give me an A, you're ruining my life. Like students saying, I don't want to be here. I have to be here. Like having to like be like, did you learn this well enough to get this grade? Like having to like teach, like when you teach in statistics, like if you start teaching upper level classes, you start having to teach a lot of theory that like I just didn't care about, kind of back to like I can't do things I don't care about. Like little things, sure, but like the big picture, like me teaching a theory class is like, sure, maybe I'd do a decent job at it, but like I'm not going to have a good time, you know? And so like I love teaching really intro level things. Like I love really that first step of like I loved teaching R, for example, like teaching R workshops specifically to like faculty, which is what a lot of what I was doing at the University of Utah. I was teaching like R, Python, machine learning, like I was teaching workshops to faculty and postdocs and people in other departments who wanted these skills because they have data and they didn't know how to do anything with it. But they weren't taking it because they wanted to like get a grade or they needed it on their transcript or they were just doing it to get a degree. They were taking it because they had a specific reason that they wanted to learn, right? And so I love teaching in those kinds of environments where it's like very much taking absolute beginners. I love teaching absolute beginners for whatever reason. and helping them realize like doing data analysis with R in particular is I always love teaching R the most, like because I think like all the tools that Hadley and you know now everyone for the tidyverse has created is they're so good for data analysis. Like I think they're so much better than like anything else that I've used. And maybe I'm biased just because that's how I learned it, you know, like that's what I grew up with in a sense. But like I love taking people from that level of like they can't do anything. They think it's like so difficult to like, oh, I can actually do some simple analyses. And like I would teach like a 2-day workshop. And like I don't necessarily think that's the best format, but like that was what I was doing. And a lot of people after that were able to incorporate it into what they were doing. And I think really that explanation part of it, that way of communicating, that is the thing that I took the most from like my teaching experience into my like job as a data scientist. Because it's like so much of what I do is like I find something in the data or I have a result and I need to explain to people who are not technical. I need to explain to them like, what does this mean? Like in the context of like decisions we have to make or like things we have to communicate to clients. Like how do you translate this like data thing to an actual like practical real world thing?
Yeah, I had a similar experience. Like just teaching that kind of intro to programming and data science just felt so empowering to people. And that's I kind of feel like I do feel like I don't know, wistful that it feels like the next generation is not going to have that experience just because it seems like so much of what they're going to do is mediated through AI and that kind of pure experience of like turning your ideas into code that the computer then does something with. Like there's just such a like a fun, like yeah, it's empowering. It's something that I love doing, and it just feels like that's like that relationship between you and the computer is fundamentally changing. Like who knows where we're going to end up, but it certainly seems like writing your ability to write code is like less important now than it was 5 years ago. And I do feel like wistful for those simpler times.
I admire a lot of the educators right now who are trying to figure out how to adapt, you know, the way that you teach in the wake of like we do things differently now, you know. Not everyone does, but I do. I do things very differently now, and I think people learning are going to be doing things very differently, and like the way that you teach has to change as well, and that's not always something people are prepared for.
But I guess, I mean, people must have had similar like wistfulness about like, oh, it's so good on the slide ruler. Like, and now like that skill is just, I felt so empowered when I learned how to use
The punch cards, the
ruler.
punch cards.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is an interesting trade-off. Do you have a sense if you had to like teach someone how to like get started with like AI and data analysis today? Like how would you approach it?
Man, I think about that sometimes because like I was kind of when I was like wrapping up at the University of Utah, they were starting up like AI initiatives and like doing all of this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I don't 100% know. Like I think I have things that I would try. Because like the way that I learn now is different. Like I've always taught people in the way that I try to remember like how is it when I learn something and like use my own experiences from learning to like teach, right? So I think like now the way I learn something, and I probably would try and teach in a similar way, is like I try and get the basics down. Like sometimes I use AI to do that, but I'm not trying to like use AI to do it for me until I feel like I at least understand the general syntax of the language or like whatever I'm trying to do. Like let's say Streamlit was the example because I literally like had never heard of Streamlit and I had to use Streamlit, which is like essentially a dashboard, like a reactive dashboard, that uses Python code. It's a Python library. And like, you know, I just kind of went to AI and I think I went to Gemini and I was like, I need to create a Streamlit app to create this plot. And I just looked at the code that it gave me. And like, I at least have like, I know how to code. So like, I can kind of like look at that and be like, understand at least somewhat what it's doing. And then I'll kind of like go through and I'll be like, what does this line do? And what does this line do? And like, why is it structured like this? And like, I'll try and like create something and copy it and run it. And then I'll be like, I'll see what errors I get. And like, maybe I'll do some like regular Googling or AI Googling, you know, and like, it is very much an interactive thing with AI. Like I don't start out being like do it for me and not expecting, like I start out maybe being like, do it for me as a learning experience. Like do it for me, but like, I want to understand what you're doing, you know? So like, I do use the AI kind of like as a tutor and like very quickly, I felt like I understood kind of how the syntax worked. And like, I felt like I could probably like modify it. I couldn't necessarily write it from scratch myself, but I don't know that I need to be able to anymore now that I have AI, you know? So it's like, I think learning for me, like I want to get to a basic level of understanding so that when I do encounter errors and want to do some more sophisticated things, I know how to guide the AI. But I do actually use AI these days to get me to that point. Like, but I don't necessarily vibe code as like, say, I don't care how this works, just do it. Like, I don't know, it's a trade-off. It's a balance. So I think like if I were to teach it, it would be like, how do we interact with the AI in a way that we can effectively understand what the code is doing and be able to at least conceptually create it ourselves, even if we can't necessarily write it from start to finish ourselves? Because I don't think we need to be able to anymore necessarily.
Yeah.
You
It's
know?
really interesting to hear it's like generating a case study for you
Yeah.
that you're able to kind of like take the example and have it break it down and then try to like transfer it to what you want to do as like a learning aid. So you like pick up a little bit, but you're also not needing to start from like zero.
The question I kind of wonder about is like, do you need to be able to do like maths in your head when calculators exist? Like, how important is it that you still have some like programming abilities?
Yeah. I kind of think like at the moment it's still a little bit important, but down the line as these tools get better and better and better, like maybe less and less important. I think we do still need to be able to code, but like I don't know how long that'll be true for.
There is still though, there's always still like the imprecision of English. There's always going to be cases where you could look at the code and make the, like if you understand it, you can just be like, oh, I need to change this, and it's really easy. And if you've got to express that in English, like it's either like it's ambiguous and you're going to go through multiple loops, or yeah, as you said, sometimes the AI just gets stuck doing like weird things in an endless loop, and it's just easier for you to do it yourself. But
Yeah, although I do kind of wonder, like, I mean, right now it's like we use the AI to write code, or the AI is writing code under the hood, and it's like at some point, is the AI going to get so good that it doesn't really need like code? Like, the code is like just a tool we use to get from like question to answer, right? Like, is it going to develop something where it's like not really code as we know it? You know, like it can do the reasoning and figure out stuff, but it's not necessarily writing Python code or R code to like answer the question. I don't know. Like it's like this kind of formless thing in my head. Sometimes I'm like the code is the tool that we created for us, but like maybe at some point, like for certain types of tasks, like the code itself is kind of going to become obsolete. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I feel like with arithmetic, it's funny because like arithmetic, like the operation of adding numbers is one a calculator can do. But I almost feel like the code is the like, if you were to break apart that sequence of numbers you're adding, often it's still useful to have that. That's like more the representation of the problem. Like if you're accounting and you're adding up numbers, I feel like having those numbers there is to me the code, where the adding is kind of like the execution. Like still having that representation seems useful, but I guess it's also fair, like at a point where you're confident enough, you could just use English and not even have to think about
I mean,
it.
the point is like but AI is never going to be as reliable as like a calculator, in the sense that we can prove that a calculator can do addition 100% correctly. Like AI can never get to that point.
It still isn't very good at adding. I think I just wrote a blog post about LLM struggling to add numbers. They've gotten better, but it's not 100% not 100% of the time.
Oh yeah, like I feel like when I Google something and it comes up with that AI thing at the top, I just usually scroll straight past it because I'm like, it's just wrong. Like it's 70% of the time it's just wrong.
Or it'll be like, according to one Reddit user. It's like, is that your source?
Yeah, it's pretty freaky. I think we're getting pretty long in the tooth, kind of running up at time, but I really appreciate just all of this like thought on AI and teaching. And
I'll say I am impressed that you've like held on to your accent for pronouncing data and
My accent, I think, is at this point, it's increasingly American though. Like there's like, I think you still sound like a solid Kiwi, Hadley. Like,
but I don't say
don't know.
data. I don't say data anymore. I say data.
Yeah, but it's data. I mean,
Data.
when I was teaching R a lot, and maybe you get the same thing where I'll just be like R, and people are like,
Yeah, that's why I say
"Ah."
R now. That's because Australians and New Zealanders have a non-rhotic R, which is set like the vowel sound.
Like, ah.
It's very confusing.
I like to think that are you saying whenever you chat with like an Australian or New Zealand, you're like clocking their use of data? You're like,
Hadley clearly is.
got ya. Yeah.
Just when I'm in America and someone says data, I'm like, oh, that's not an American. I'm like,
I think there's some words, like I do put R's in places now where I don't think they belong. The letter R and the sound R, but there's certain words that I hold on to with dear life. So for example, like I'm not wearing a sweater right now, I'm wearing a jumper. And I will hold on to that for the rest of my life. Even though every time someone's like, a jumper, isn't that like a jumpsuit? And I'm like, no.
I love that. I think it's good to keep people on their toes, like you got to have like a couple things. Yeah, Rebecca, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate all your thoughts on AI and also your role building out tooling. I feel like it's such an interesting role for data scientists to take in orgs. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It was good to chat with you all.
yeah, thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
The Test Set is a production of Posit PBC, an open source and enterprise tooling data science software company. This episode was produced in collaboration with creative studio Agi. For more episodes, visit thetestset.co or find us on your favorite podcast platform.